What's up, guys? Brady Fugel here, coming at you with a review for the new Her Last Sight EP Season Summer, released a couple weeks ago now on August 1st, as well as also a review of their previous EP Seasons Winter, released back in December of last year. I'm combining both 7-song EPs into, I guess, one 14-track review. Or 14 tracks, but really only 10 full-length songs. This band intrigued me. I found them actually on YouTube. I was scrolling shorts, and one of their songs happened to pop up, and they were obviously very, very inspired by notable 2000s metalcore acts, which is one of my all-time favorite time periods in metal music, period. Killswitch Engage, and As I Lay Dying, and Trivium, and All That Remains, Bullet for My Valentine. These bands are literally they were the biggest crossover bands for me, period, as far as kind of making that transition from liking more hard rock music into eventually liking extreme metal. These bands were some of the most important bands, period, for me, so they hold a very special place in my heart, and 2000s metalcore as a whole does. So it always interests me when I find a new band that kind of is inspired by that sound, but at the same time, even as a massive fan of that style of metalcore, I should say, even I can acknowledge that it is maybe at this point bordering on purely derivative, very much in the same vein that just pure thrash metal is. Metalcore as a whole certainly is not. Like, several modern metalcore bands prove that and are still pushing boundaries into more new and creative directions, but mid 2000s melodic metalcore in particular, it is kind of getting to that point. Let's just kind of get that out there. So I'm always looking for new bands to kind of take that style and do some more creative stuff with it. And I will say, this band definitely, at the bare minimum, attempts to do that on this record. Those attempts may not always be successful, but they definitely try, which immediately I have to say I respect the shit out of that. And also, just to clarify, I understand this is 2 EPs, but as far as I'm concerned, they're released cohesively. They're very similar style. Production sounds exactly the same. They have the same theme, just being seasons. So I will be referring to all these songs collectively as an album, but I'm going to do my best when I'm talking about individual tracks to clarify which EP they're on. So as far as the music on here that pushes the boundaries of that 2000s melodic metalcore sound, I will say there are a few tracks like Blinded by Ignorance and Lying Sun, both off of the Winter EP, that bring in some prominent groove metal influence, and I love to hear that. Then the last 2 songs off of the Summer EP, Start Again and I'm Sorry, both have some subtle prog and gent influence a little bit. I guess you can say progressive metalcore in a way. I'm Sorry in particular is probably the biggest departure among both EPs. It's got these like chiming keys in the intro that I think are very soulful. It's got, again, kind of like a genty, chunky main riff. And the emotive ideas and the overall mood of this song very much does set it apart. I think this is far and away the most unique song, not just on this album, but in any recent 2000s metalcore, even by those at this point, even maybe legacy bands that I mentioned earlier. A part of me earlier in the Summer EP has a lot of like more exotic type melodies that maybe you'd hear from some of All That Remains' older output, but even that song still felt a little bit different just overall in its mood. It has those exotic melodies both in the guitar licks, the lead guitar, as well as even some those kind of clean vocal melodies that pop in the verses. Triggered actually kind of bridges the gap between that classic metalcore sound and some more modern, especially hardcore influence, just in the absolute abundance of pinch harmonics. And this is really the one song among both projects that just goes straight for being nonstop aggressive the whole time. There aren't really any melodic detours in this track. And there are some moments in the song also that genuinely like throw you for a loop. Like right at the 1 minute mark, it has this kind of like glitch where the music kind of all like winds down and then just like picks back up right away. It's hard to describe exactly the sound of that part, but just skip to that timestamp, you hear what I'm talking about. I thought that was really cool. Also, the double tempo change that ends this song I thought was really well done, and I couldn't help but crack up at the Modern Warfare 2, the Call of Duty sample, when you hear the guy say, "Tactical nuke incoming." It actually kind of works, and as an old school Call of Duty fan, I haven't played the game in years, but as an old school Call of Duty fan, I can't help I can't help but have a slight affinity for that, that they actually made that work. The thing about that, though, about all those songs I just mentioned, and probably my biggest frustration with this album, is that I don't think those ideas are quite explored enough. With the exception of Triggered, which pretty much those compliments I had for the song pretty much do describe the entire song, the rest of the songs I just talked about that do kind of reach for new ideas, they don't really end up being foundations of the song. They kind of end up just being like spice thrown in on top of what pretty much takes up the entire record, just that pure 2000s metalcore sound. I would have liked to see the band use maybe that foundation for the album, but have individual tracks that just go purely for a different type sound, because the end result is an album that ends up still feeling a little bit derivative, a little bit repetitive, and a little bit safe and unadventurous. Because like Lying Sun and I'm Sorry, both two songs I just talked about, the problem I have with these songs is that these ideas, they're just contrasted a bit too hard with the rest of the song. Like Lying Sun in particular, I find that those more interesting melodic parts and the heavy parts, both of which could stand alone and are good parts, don't get me wrong, but combined in the same song, it ends up feeling a little bit pieced together, a little bit robotic, and as a result, a bit disjointed. Like the song Lying Sun, it has those really bubbly synth melodies in the intro. It's got those really gorgeous, clean guitar melodies in the verses. And these parts of the song just feel really soulful. But then the heavy parts come in, and it kind of feels like it's a totally different song taking over. And then when it goes back into the melodic parts, it doesn't really feel the same. It doesn't hit as hard. Again, that's not to say that these parts are bad. I mean, that crazy triplet groove that kicks in at like the 2:15 mark is fucking sick. And then at the 4:15 mark, there's this complete, like, way out of left field mood shift into like this quirky acoustic guitar section that almost has like a slight reggae vibe to it. Completely surprised me. I had no idea. I did not see that coming at all. It almost to me reminded me a little bit of like Between the Buried and Me, something they would do. Oddly enough, that part being the most like out of left field moment on the whole song actually is the one mood shift here that works. The rest of the song feels a bit too disjointed for me. I can never really lock in and feel a consistent mood on this song. And I'm Sorry too. This is one where the instruments in particular are a bit more consistent, but there are a few parts in the song where there's screams and there's just harsh vocals over the more emotional music, and I don't really think that works. It again feels like sort of conflicting moods being played on top of each other. It makes for somewhat of a jarring listen. A Part of Me Too, again, I love the exotic vibes in a lot of those melodies, both on the guitars and the vocal front, but the chorus ends up being a little bit generic. It just, I wish those ideas kind of took up the whole song, because it would make the song a lot more memorable. It would make it stand out much more, because the end result is, it's like, rather than being like, okay, I'm going to go to this entire song because it has such this cool vibe to it, it ends up being like, okay, you're listening to it, and it's like, all right, that part was cool, but now it's just more of the same. The band clearly has an interest in these unique sounds among all these tracks, but I think they didn't really go all in on it. They took a half measure in a sense. And as a result, I do think that overall, the Winter EP is the stronger of the two EPs, because in particular, the first three tracks are just absolute monsters. These are all songs that pull off that kind of yin and yang heavy melodic thing just much better, much smoother. They bring in new creative ideas that are even more memorable, despite them being even shorter at times, like that kind of glitch section in the breakdown on Hope, and just that entire bridge section in general. When you get into the second verse of the song Zero, there's some really like rapid fire, almost rap leaning vocal cadences that mash up with the rhythm section to create this really interesting, like almost like a nu metal meets gent section. And it's only like 10 seconds long, but it just, stuff like that really stands out in a song like this. Scarlet, Memories, Reimagined too. All three of these songs, just in general, has some gorgeous melodies. The lead guitar work in these songs is absolutely phenomenal. There are a few quiet parts that actually do like amp up the emotion as opposed to killing it, or killing the momentum, I should say. Also, Blinded by Ignorance, even though to me it isn't quite as memorable as the first three tracks, the riffing in this song really does kind of carry the rest of the song, because if those riffs weren't as ear candy as they are, I think this one would be a bit forgettable. I should also single out Dead End, the opening track on the Summer EP. The second verse of that song is much like the first three tracks I mentioned on Winter. It's just a bit more dynamic, a bit more unpredictable, and it really spices up the song. And it also has another cool solo to end it. As far as overarching notes I have on this album, I have to say, and like I kind of alluded to earlier, the lead guitar is the absolute MVP of both of these EPs. On a lot of these tracks like Hope and Scarlet Zero and Dead End, the biggest influence that came to mind overall was All That Remains, which is very fitting considering like Ollie Herbert is maybe the most criminally underrated guitarist in metal, period. Rest in peace, Ollie. But and similar vibes here. The lead guitar really carries the song, carries much of this album. On the vocal front, I think the harsh vocals were great. Clean vocals were a little spotty, not gonna lie. There's a lot of choruses in particular where they just sound really whiny. It's when he goes for like those higher register vocals that the whininess really kind of sounds a little bit jarring, not gonna lie. They still at least fit the song, but it's always something you kind of will wince at if you're like me when you listen to these songs. Also, aside from the interlude tracks, which I'll touch on in a second, there are some studio effects on these songs, like some choir vocals and some synths and some strings. I don't really think they do much. They don't really add anything to the song. And also on the production front, I do think the album as a whole does sound a little bit overly polished. I think a more raw, organic sounding production, or at least somewhat of a balance between raw and polished, would have came off just a bit more genuine. Just the kind of blatant shimmer this album has and its ultra clean production affects most of the album, but the rhythm guitar tone in particular I find suffers at parts. And I also think the band maybe missed an opportunity with these kind of season-themed EPs to kind of have the music itself match whatever season it's going for. Like, for example, for the winter, maybe have some darker, more colder type vibes, and then for the summer, have more of like that bright, like and more positive, uplifting feel. I just think that would have added a bit to the theme that I think these EPs were going for. All of these like overall album criticisms I'm having, they don't end up affecting the listening experience that much for me. The one that does, like I said I would mention, is all of these interludes. And like I mentioned earlier, if you take out the interludes, when you combine both EPs, that takes all of this project from 14 songs down to 10 songs, which is pretty significant. And they don't really add anything. Like Storm, the intro one on Winter, it's just got these transmissions in it, and it feels like space filler. And then the title track on Winter, as well as Challenges, the opening on the Summer EP, they kind of end up evolving into full-on instrumental tracks, or in Challenges' case, actually a full-on song with vocals. But, you know, the parts themselves are fine, and there's actually some creative parts. I especially love the lead guitar work on Winter, the song Winter. But I wish they were full songs. Because on a song like Winter, where I actually enjoy the melodies going on, I just feel like there's nothing that will make me want to return to it, just purely because it's a kind of non-essential instrumental track on this EP. And then the track The Hotel on the Summer EP, the second interlude on there, there's the guy who introduces the band, and there's some like crowd chatter and some kind of clean guitar playing, and this one I respect a little bit more, just because it's obviously meant to be a bit more tongue-in-cheek. They're going for something a bit funny, a bit goofy, and it did make me crack up, so it at least maybe accomplished its job there. But does it add anything to the album? Not really. Now, don't get me wrong, there are still some killer songs on both of these EPs, so as far as I'm concerned, the band still did a good job. They definitely have gained a follower in me. I'm very curious to see what they'll do next. If they end up doing a spring and a fall double EP again, I'll review those together also. But based on these two EPs, I see a band with a lot of potential that isn't really quite fleshed out enough as I think it could be. For all of these reasons, I'm going to give these combined EPs a total score of 18 out of 30. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you've listened to these two EPs, please comment below what you think. Remember to hit the subscribe button for more rock, metal album reviews or double EP reviews. And check the description of the video for my Instagram, Spotify, and Threads links. As always, thank you guys again so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace.